This is David Rice. I have the Substack Hit Christian, and it's my honor to be working with authors that are local authors, actually, who are creative. They're doing some really cool things, and I want to introduce them to our community. One of the authors I have the opportunity to talk to you today is Gage Copeland. He wrote a book called The Time Rider, Time Doesn't Change Everyone. And I think I was able to read the first 5 chapters, and I really enjoyed it. I went through it pretty quick. It's young adult sci-fi, is that right?
Young adult science fiction, yes.
Okay, so tell me about Charlotte. She's the main character?
Well, since I'm a lover of most of my characters, it's hard to define who's really the main character. That's why I was insistent on having the 2 of them on the front cover. But yeah, she is this character I start with. She's by far the youngest character in my story.
Mm-hmm.
I've often joked with myself that if I were to ever have a daughter, it would probably be like Charlotte, because she's a big movie, not like I was. And well, just trying to find my words.
No, so you think she's a little moody? I think she's a little moody too. She seems to be having conflicts with her parents, her mom, but she has a mom and dad.
Yep.
And that's kind of cool because you see a lot of stories where they're orphans, right?
Sure.
And you didn't give her that orphan background. You gave her a mother, father, and I think that's interesting. And I think that gives her a new dynamic. You're kind of messing with that stereotype of the hero, not being like a found orphan, and I like that.
Well, sometimes orphans, sometimes people. Like with Charlotte specifically, she does have the father-mother dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
but dare I say I put a small twist on it, because the mother is almost comically cheery and uplifting at times, but her father, who she would arguably be closer to, is off fighting in the Middle East. I imply that it's not necessarily contemporary, but maybe 5 or so years, maybe around 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a daddy's girl. She loves her dad, and well, there's just a lot of confusion. And around when that Afghanistan things happened about 4 years ago, it really made me realize what it might actually be like to have someone go off and serve in a war and never know if they're going to come home or not.
So you do give her a bit of that is a bit of a darkness, That my dad served in the military. He went to Korea for 13 months. He didn't fight in a war, but having that gap in my life, it affected me, and so I assume that affects Charlotte's story.
Yes, and it's an overarching theme, specifically with Mr. Elliot Rose, her father.
Mm-hmm.
About people that go into dangerous situations, or people that just struggle each and every day for a purpose that maybe they don't understand, or maybe the people that they fight for that don't understand. That's a big theme here.
So her mom's cheery, her dad is sort of a warrior, kind of gives her like a model for how she's going to behave. So I assume that Charlotte, as she goes through the story, she's going to be, what does Charlotte do in the story beyond chapter 5?
Well,
without giving away too much of the story.
Well, in a juxtaposed irony, her father was a big movie nut himself, and he showed what he loved to his daughter. So that was something she quite enjoyed. The stories of knights and valiants and things like that, crazy monsters and stuff like that. And beyond chapter 5, she ironically gets stuck in a situation just like that.
Yeah.
And she ends up learning too much, and people start to pursue her, and then the other great hero of the story, the Time Rider himself,
Mm-hmm.
has to step in and make sure she doesn't get hurt.
One of the cool things as an author, I also write, but I'm not published. But one of the cool things I really enjoyed seeing you do is you gave yourself a lot of room to describe different monsters as the series goes on. So you said, we have discovered like the scouts, and we've discovered the knights, but we're always discovering new creatures, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a really cool way for you to always have this creative ability to introduce whatever you want as you go along.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I call them the Revenants.
Mm-hmm.
The big sci-fi element here is it takes place in a reality much like our own, but a corporation found a way to preach our door into another version of our world where things move far quicker And it's mostly barren, except for these things that like to visit our world from time to time. And like you mentioned, there's multiple different variations that I could literally make up on the fly, and that's the fun part about them, you know?
Yeah.
It's very similar to other sci-fis, like the Alien series. I don't know if you'd be familiar with that, but in a sense, it works almost like a colony of insects, where you have hierarchies and different variants that do different things. So, like maybe the knight variants, or the warrior class, or scouts, or the drone class, you know. And of course, there's mix-ups. Like there's flying variants. There's one that can shoot projectiles. It's whatever I want it to be.
Yeah, so as an author, you gave yourself so much room. You didn't close yourself down, and I think that's really neat because as you go through multiple books, how many books do you have planned for this series?
My hope is 4 books.
Okay.
And if there is demand, maybe perhaps a spin-off here or there, but that's very ambitious of me to think that, but you never know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a start. So how many times every author goes through the idea of their first novel. So when did you decide I was going to write this book for the first time?
Oh, goodness. It goes back years. I was even thinking about it yesterday. One of my more fonder memories now is sitting down in a high school room writing a chapter with Charlotte in the same way I do it in my main book. It was a conceptual chapter where she's dreaming of running through the woods while something's chasing her, and then she wakes up abruptly. That's not in the final story, but that was my first prototype chapter. It's gone through an evolution. Like, again, like Charlotte, I wanted to represent myself a little bit through her. I was just a lover of film, and my grandmother was an author, so I always wanted to follow in her footsteps in her own unique way. But really, I didn't sit down to do it for a good long time. I think a lot of people that begin writing, they might do a handful of chapters and just stop. But luckily, I went through a bit of a rough time a few years ago. I had a crisis of faith and stuff like that. Maybe struggled mentally a bit. But I got out of that hole, and then one day I just started writing my book, and it just came to fruition because I kept doing it because I enjoyed it. That's the key here.
Did it feel like a calling?
A bit, yeah. I mean, excuse me. I mean, purpose for a lot of young men these days is something that's hard to come by, and this isn't curing cancer or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's something I've always wanted to do, and I've had friends yell at me like, "You're finally actually doing it. I better get credit for it and all." You know?
Do you mind if I look? Do you have like at the very beginning? Do you like list all the people you give credit to?
It was.
Oh, your acknowledgements. Yeah, you got a pretty big acknowledgement page.
Yeah, it was mostly my grandmother. It was the one that I kept harassing near the entire process. Just, hey, let me know how it's going on. Let me know what's going on. But just to be clear, that was me calling her all the time, not her calling me all the time.
Sure.
And my editor was a very nice woman during the process. My first manuscripts were wild, to say the least, and she helped me trim it down a little bit. And
it takes time. Yeah, I know the first time I worked on Wounded World, I threw it away. And then I worked on it again, and I threw it away, and I worked on it again, and I threw it away. I'm only been happy with it after the 5th revision, so it took a while. So let's go back to the book and talk about Ryder. So Ryder is this unique person.
Yes.
He has special powers, and why does he have these special powers? I know because I read, but what can you tell the podcast?
Well, in order to understand that, we kind of have to go back to the Revenants themselves, the great monsters that he chooses to fight each and every day.
Yeah.
They live among us, but no one ever knows they're there. The biggest reason is that the way they create more of their own is they'll kidnap people and bring them into their own world. No one actually knows exactly what happens, but whatever is left of you becomes one of them. And for whatever reason, it seems like the entire person's existence is revoked. It's never happened. Or time itself just seems to rewrite itself so that you were never born.
Mm-hmm.
And years ago, they got a hold of him when he was young, about 17 years old. And they took him in, but something odd happened. He changed, but not completely. So he's a bit of a half and half human, half revenant. I describe him in the book as a living contradiction, somewhere between living and dead, between cold and hot. like his skin and hair is a very blank color, but his demeanor and his personality is so warm that it kind of drowns that all out.
Mm-hmm.
And because of what happened to him, well, outside of the few aesthetic features, like the fact that his eyes glow a very bright blue now, he's able to go into this new world, this time stream, as they began to call it, at will. He exists in two places at once. The parallel being was how I described him. But it's so much quicker there, and he can move essentially like a superhero, like the Flash or other very quick superheroes.
Yeah.
I don't like calling him that, but that's just kind of how it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, taking into basic science, when things are moving extremely quickly in one place and come out somewhere else, it's a lot quicker. And that's where, and you'll see a specific instance later in the book where he uses momentum to get the advantage in a situation.
You have that like in the first chapter when he meets Charlotte for the first time.
Yep.
And so there's scouts that are coming at him, and he's able to use his speed to defeat the scouts that are trying to attack him.
And it's essentially like a freight train hitting you if he does it right. I'm writing in my second book that if you're not careful, you could easily break your hand doing something like that.
Yeah.
And, well, I mentioned in chapter 5, the most important part of Revenant and Ryder respectively is that they both suffer or are gifted with a cellular stasis that is called the ageless factor.
Yeah.
In layman's terms, they do not age. Their cells never deteriorate past that certain point.
Which is why the company that is sort of like the corporation Oracle, which is a real world corporation.
Yeah, I realized that after the fact. I'm sure they're completely legitimate business.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they are too. But because they're a real world corporation, did you have any problems with that?
No, it's a funny story because, well, an oracle in ancient Greece was like a prophet that was, an envoy for the gods. They could see into the future and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I haven't written it in my book yet, but they have a tagline like, "We can foresee the future of technology," and that's mainly what it was. There's lots of references to ancient Greece in there. It's something about their CEO was fond of those old legends.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out because I work in a gas station, and I saw I'm sure someone knows who they are, but this gentleman that does race cars with the Oracle insignia on his front cover, I'm like, oh, nice face palm. Oh, man. Like, I mean, I know chances are that's probably gonna be a real thing. I mean, it's a good name for a company, but no, I know very little about the actual Oracle Corporation, and my version is very nefarious, to say the least.
Sure, yeah, and so that's kind of one of the cool things about what you're doing. This is like a real world situation. It's fantasy, well, sci-fi, but like Harry Potter's set in a real world. It's London, and your book is sci-fi, science fiction, set in the real world, sort of like Stargate is. And so,
Sure.
And so you have this opportunity for exploring St. Louis. Do you explore other locations in Missouri?
Not necessarily for the second one, but I do plan on expanding the horizons internationally, as a matter of fact, in the third one, so the threat gets much larger than just one city in the Midwest.
Sure.
Or South. Someone would probably argue with me about that.
Uh-huh.
But I guess there's just a sense of irony there. Like, I know Stephen King likes to write his stories in his home state of Maine.
Yeah.
And I guess in a little bit of irony, I did something similar. But when you look at other stories, especially like in the superhero genre, it's always New York, Chicago, maybe even California.
Mm-hmm.
But no one ever does St. Louis. And I know it's a smaller city, but it's very similar in kind of scope and scale, and it has the landmarks like the Gateway Arch, Busch Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a cool little city, and I felt it was like untapped potential there.
Yeah, and I think that's good because I think one of the things people do is we ignore Missouri and writing. Mark Twain doesn't, but outside of Mark Twain, a lot of people do. And you see people wanting to talk about New York, or they want to talk about Los Angeles. One of the funny things I did in my book is the very first chapter is set in Springfield, and the whole world is destroyed after the first chapter. Essentially, humanity's destroyed after the first chapter, but it's set in Springfield. That's where humanity meets its end.
Wow.
But no one,
place.
yeah, but no one knows that because I don't call it Springfield. But in my head canon, that's where it happens, and so that's I like having those little Easter eggs. You know, if someone's paying attention, they would recognize that I'm describing the underground in Springfield. And, you know,
Yeah.
and so there's little things like that. So, looking forward to your next book, when do you plan on having it published?
Hopefully this year. The manuscript is very massive, and it has to be bigger than the last one, of course. But I have a job on top of things like that, so writing is scarce and far between, and I kind of have to be in the mood, you know.
Yeah, no, I get it. Writing it comes and goes. It doesn't. You can't just always sit down at the computer and just be like, oh, I'm going to do 2,000 words today.
But yes, a sequel is most definitely in development. It's about 120,000 pages, or not pages,
Words. Yeah.
Sorry, I speak before I can.
So that's what, about 400 pages, 500 pages?
It's a lot. I believe this one's around 92,000 words, and it's roughly about 300 pages.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't need to be making the Odyssey here, but
I do find that as you go on, you develop more characters, and as you develop more characters, it gets richer. And did you ever read Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time?
No, unfortunately, I have not.
He's got thousands of characters. And
Thousands?
Thousands.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so it's hard to keep up. Over 13 books, and he died before they were completed. So Brandon Sanderson was a young man, and he finished the last 3, I believe. And so it's just a really complex book. But the first one is long, but the rest are really long because he just has so many characters you're trying to follow.
I thought I had too many.
Yeah. So you have Sloane, you have Charlotte, you have Ryder. Those are the 3 main characters I read in the first. But you have Rudy too.
Yes, he's the keeper of the gas station. He's
Yeah.
arguably one of my favorite characters to actually write. Even my editor said, we want more Rudy. He'll probably be a fan favorite if you.
Yeah, I killed off one of my fan favorites in my first book, so they weren't all. No one's been happy with that. So, what else do you like? What else do you like about your book?
Well, I mean, what else do I like about it?
I mean, if you were going to tell someone your favorite part about the book, your favorite moment, the favorite character, favorite story, why would you, if you were a reader picking up the book, why would you want to read it?
Well, I like to think it's a book for film buffs because it's inspired a lot by very 80s sci-fi, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, Aliens. I've often joked that Spider-Man meets Aliens.
Okay.
So if that sounds interesting and up your alley, I'd say go right ahead. But really, even I go back occasionally and just enjoy just watching them talk together. I don't know how I put it all together in my head, but it's very easily digestible, and I try to put in deeper things for people that want to find those things. And there's a lot to like, especially there's fighting, there's monsters, there's a few moral dramatic themes if you're interested in that kind of thing. And
yeah. I found that overall it was really well written. I liked the direction of the book and the characters. I was definitely interested in reading more. So I would recommend it to everyone who's got a youth. Are there any restrictions on it that you would offer to anybody who's got like a homeschool family or like anything like that?
One thing I didn't stray away from is a bit of bad language at times. That's the only thing you would have to worry about.
Okay.
And I think I've unsold my book a couple of times because I haven't been able to explain that correctly. It's nothing you haven't seen on TV, nothing too crazy, but if you want some
PG-13?
Exactly. I often describe it as such. Like Spencer Carter, he's a bigger part of the book. He's an older gentleman that's a little... what's the right word?
Colorful.
He's very colorful. Yeah, he's got a bit of dirt behind his ears a little bit, so he's got a bit of a foul mouth. He's not a bad guy, even if he insists otherwise. But
yeah,
he gets angry occasionally, and a little bit of language slips out. And a big part of the book is lots of these militant operators. You haven't seen them yet, but they're scouted from all over the world, from police and military and things like that, so they might have some bad language here or there.
Okay, so that's just good information because some of my listeners are homeschool families, and so they would like to know that ahead of time. All right, well, I appreciate you coming in, Gage. This was a really great interview. Do you have any final comments you would like to share with the audience?
Well, I just want to say thank you to you and for coming out and actually allowing me to speak about something that I've put a lot of work and my heart into, and anyone that interested and has enjoyed the book, thank you for your support. I mean, it's not really about the money at this point. I just finally completed a dream of mine.
Yeah.
And,
well, I would like for you to be successful enough to get all your books done. So hopefully it starts to pay. So I don't think I have anything else for you. And I will make sure that I put the links to it on Amazon.
Okay.
I'll put a picture of it up on Amazon, on my Substack. And so if you guys want to find this, you'll be able to find it on Rumble, YouTube, and Sam Britton's Missouri Liberty Radio. Of course, you'll also be able to find it on my Substack, Hit Christian. Thank you guys so much. You all have a great day. Bye.
Toodles.